Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 8 of We're Watching the Watchmen, where we discuss in depth the HBO show Watchmen. We spoil everything up through episode 8. We do not watch the coming soon trailers, so you don't have to worry about us spoiling anything from there. We make predictions, but they're not typically all that great. So I will put out a minor statement here about the actual episode today. So there was a scene after the credits. Most of you probably know this at this point, but if for whatever reason you did not know that, we will discuss that on this show. So if you have not watched it, I would advise you pause the podcast here and go find the scene after the credits. And it is not the previews that is usually right after the credits. This is an actual scene after the credits on this episode. So if you haven't seen that, stop the podcast and go check that out. My name is Eric Madsen. I'm here at Flicksation Studios, P City, Wisco. Joined tonight by Christian Estabrook. I wish I could say the usual, but I don't believe he's in San Francisco, California tonight, but we'll figure that out in a minute. Christian, how are things?
The paradox. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The answer appears to be both at exactly the same time. I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. Christian, where are you, man?
I need to do two. Sorry, hold on. Eric?
Yes.
Enjoy your fucking cake.
I will. Where are you, Christian?
I am not in San Francisco. I'm in Dallas, or just outside of Dallas, Texas. I'm in Richardson, Texas, for a work trip, and I am sitting in my hotel room. Hopefully I sound okay. But yeah, I'm sitting here at this awkward, tiny desk, and I am eating cake.
Nice. Yeah, this is the cake episode, if you do recall last time. So I have a chocolate cupcake here. It just so happens to be my wife's birthday today.
Whoa.
So this would be one of her birthday cupcakes, but timing was perfect. So yeah, works out. Chocolate cupcake, chocolate cake, frosting, buttercream, rainbow sprinkles, the whole 9 yards. So looking good, guys. I'm going to tear into this in just a minute. Chad Colt, Reedsburg, Wisconsin. Chad, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Looks like I'm the cheater of the night. I'm eating some Swiss cake rolls. It had the cake in the name. It was easy. And as I was saying earlier, I don't feel like I get cake enough like during cake occasions, let alone on non-cake days. But I was prepared to cheat.
Oh, man. Eric, I think we need to smash some tomatoes in Chad's face tonight.
Yeah, that is becoming more and more apparent as we move on.
You know, you guys do that a couple times, and I will easily give up and have cake, real cake.
Yeah. All right, so you can contact the show anytime on the voicemail line. You can do it either text or leave a voicemail at 608-535-9302. Email the show, watchmenpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram or Twitter at PodWatchmen. So that's where you can find us online. Christian Ponders, we always go to first here and look at how we did predicting this week's episode. Christian, we definitely knew we were going to get something heavy with John and Angela. Probably, I mean, we should have known, but it was pretty much straight up those two, throwing aside a Vite here. But otherwise, yeah, it didn't dip too much into any other things. I would just say before we even get into this, Christian Ponders, I don't have any idea how they're going to shove all this shit into a one more episode that we would like resolved. But
yeah,
Who knows? Who knows?
Maybe they got a surprise episode 10.
Well,
maybe.
it's pretty strange, and we'll get into it. But this episode pays off a lot of things that I didn't even think were going to be paid off. So most of the loose ends that we know as of now, after episode 8, it's like I think that they're not going to leave us hanging on any major stuff. But how do they have time in 60 minutes? I guess we'll find out.
All right, so before we get to our last week's predictions, I will say I'm surprised it took this long, but somebody got a 2-week point on the board. Mr. Chad Colt over there. 2 weeks ago, you predicted the cake would make an appearance, and the cake made an appearance. So
a big one.
Yep,
big one. We should also say that's a little spoilerish if you didn't watch the parts after.
Yeah. So hopefully you haven't gotten this far after my warning. But the cake makes an appearance. And God, guys, I was this close to the game warden maybe cracking into that cake. But no, I didn't get my point. But Chad, you did. You sure did. So Christian,
I will take my point.
Let's take a look at what you picked for last week. Your first selection was Looking Glass might infiltrate the cavalry, but you thought his plan would come up short in some regard. The logistics of that don't really matter at this point. Nothing of that sort happened in this episode. Prediction 2, you thought there'd be some kind of animal connection, elephant or otherwise, with the elephant stuff.
So close.
Pretty close.
Why didn't I just say another elephant? Why didn't I just say a different elephant? God damn it.
Yeah, or just a mention of an elephant would have been a pretty good guess. So, nope, nothing there. And there was there was definitely no would-be execution of Adrian Veidt here. I don't know if this what we saw as his supposed final punishment or whatever, but definitely no sign of any executions here, Christian.
No, sir.
So, Ofer. So, Christian, you hold at 10, and your long-term still on hold here. The cavalry and their execution of something on a date or whatever. So, looks like... Looks like these two are going to pay off probably. It took the whole run of the series, but looks like it's going to work out for you. All right, Chad, your selections this week. You got the first one for 2 points, Chad. How you thought we would learn how Dr. Manhattan becomes Cal. We
specifically
did.
Through flashbacks.
Certainly did. So 2 points there brings you up to 6, Chad. 7 with your point from 2 weeks ago. So climbing the charts, you're coming up on Christian now, Chad. 7 to 10 at this point. PD, Lube Man. Nothing there. So if the Lube Man thing is going to pay off at all, I guess we're going to... Another thing that's in store for next week. Maybe not. Who knows? And you thought Veidt's escape would coordinate with the Millennium Clock. We don't know yet. So, Chad, 2 points from this week, 1 point from last week. 3 brings you up to 7.
It's a solid week of points, I think.
So 7 and 10 so far. Mine, first one, I thought we'd find out that Lady True's plan was to wipe out the white man. Not there yet. I thought we might figure out that she is Veidt's daughter. Not there yet either. But I did think that the same actor that plays Cal would play Dr. Manhattan, and I'm finally on the board, guys. So, kind of a roundabout way, not exactly the way I thought we would get there, but Cal definitely in the blue makeup here, so 2 for me. So, didn't get the goose egg, guys. Happy about that.
Lots of blue man in this episode, that's for sure.
Lots of blue man. No blue cock, but cock.
Yeah, close enough.
It's not blue stuff, yeah. All right, so yeah, long-term mind dead. A couple episodes ago, Dr. Manhattan is indeed in this show. And
Very
Chad Veidt in the statue, again, another
Still
one
alive.
that's, if it's going to pay off, it's paying off next week. So
I don't know.
we'll see what happens.
It's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, I still think it's a long shot, but hey, you're
We'll see.
more alive than me.
I mean,
more
who
alive
who
than-
knows? How could Vite possibly get off Europa? How are they gonna? I mean, it's just, I don't know. I've been thinking that Chad was a long shot this whole time, or Chad's prediction, not Chad himself. But at this point, with one episode left, how the hell could they wrap up that storyline?
It's
in
as
a way
good a
that's-
guess as any other one out there, no doubt
right.
about it.
Like, I don't have a better suggestion as to how that's going to wrap up.
Yeah, it's not like you can just like bump off of Europa. And there's other things that happened in this episode that wouldn't allow him to be transported.
Yeah.
You know?
He's just going to horseshoe his way out of there.
What the fuck? I don't know. we'll get to the horseshoe, guys. We will get there.
We'll get there.
All right, so let's talk about episode number 8, which apparently is actually titled "A God Walks into Abar." My Amazon HBO setup still has a bar as 2 words, so I think that was pretty much the way they planned. Well, obviously, they have to put it out that way until the actual episode reveals the real title. Not to give too much away early, but a God walks into Abar here. So we've been pretty high on the series, Christian, you especially. A couple episodes ago, you pretty much hailed it as a success and one of the best things you've watched in a long time. I think you reinforced that last week. So we get another little bit of a different episode here, pretty Manhattan-centric, but we fill a lot of plot holes and still leave a lot of things I would have thought have been cleared up by now still out there. So there's that. I want to take us on a quick little aside here before I throw it over to you guys, but I wanted to connect this a little bit to one of our other projects. So, the Bookhouse podcast, where we talked about Twin Peaks, I've done a couple of rewatches of the 3rd season since the show stopped airing. And both times I listened to like a different companion podcast to go along with it, just to check some things out. So the last time I rewatched it, which was a little less than a year ago now, I listened to what would probably be considered the flagship, I don't know, Twin Peaks analysis podcast. It was just called a Twin Peaks podcast, a podcast about Twin Peaks. It was an Entertainment Weekly show. But it had these 2 Entertainment Weekly writers, one of which, Darren Franich, is the head TV guy or the head editor, and this other guy on the Twin Peaks podcast, Jeff Jensen, he was an entertainment TV critic for Entertainment Weekly. So super in depth. I mean, each podcast episode of theirs that would talk about the last episode of Twin Peaks, these things are like 2.5 hours long each. I mean, these guys tear into everything. And one thing that was interesting is they had, in the off week and some other times, they had bonus episodes in there. And twice during the run of The Return, they had Damon Lindelof as a guest just to talk about it, because Damon Lindelof, Twin Peaks fanatic, David Lynch fanatic. He was totally engrossed in the show too, and he had all these pretty crazy theories and stuff about The Return as it went along. So that was interesting in and of itself. But it turns out that guy on the Twin Peaks podcast, that writer, the TV critic guy, Jeff Jensen, left Entertainment Weekly to go work on on Watchmen with Damon Lindelof. So this Jeff Jensen is the story editor for the series, but he co-wrote this particular episode with Lindelof as well. So, and I just heard an interview with Jeff Jensen saying that so the show actually got green-lighted with Lindelof, and it went into development in January of 2017. Twin Peaks started airing in May of that year, and then Jensen said the writer's room for Watchmen basically started meeting about a month after the return was over. So he said, yeah, there was a room full of people that were huge Twin Peaks fans, and all just went... all just got off this huge high of the Twin Peaks ride. So very,
I was just going to say, but did they get to interview John Piricello? I mean,
I don't believe so. So no, they just had, they had Laura Dern and K Mac, and they got everybody. So everybody but Lynch himself, basically.
Yeah, not the Chad though.
Forrester they had on there. So, but. Yeah, so big circle connects back to Twin Peaks. This show basically, the plot end of this show basically run by 2 or 3 people that were big Twin Peaks fanatics, one of which had his own podcast, basically talking about Twin Peaks constantly. So Jeff Jensen, guys, co-writer of this episode. And now now let's talk about this episode, guys. It's great. It is great. Writing here, impeccable. How you take this non-linear, basically, love story that kind of crosses over itself constantly. I think what it does really well is, and I fall into this trap too, but I think sometimes people just assume too much of Dr. Manhattan, like he's just this infallible whatever, and I think they do a good job of really hammering home that that's not exactly the case, and he's fallible and he's got other issues going on. And I think the portrayal of Manhattan himself here is just brilliantly done. So in a lot of ways this is great, and then the way this fight stuff ties together, and yeah, I love that he's making the squid rain, guys. I love it. I don't know who's doing it while he's gone, but maybe it's on autopilot or whatever. But so much to love about this thing. It's maybe my favorite episode yet of a show I'm really loving. So, Christian, how did this episode hit for you?
Man, I just want to respond to everything you're saying. I mean, I love the idea of Veidt is going off to your rope, but he's like, oh, real quick, and he goes and hits a couple of keys and sets the autopilot on the squid rain. All right, now I'll send me to your rope. Thanks, Doc. But yeah, I mean, you said it already. I've been quite positive. I want to. I don't know. I'm not even gonna hold back for one more episode. I am gonna just cement my feelings further and further now. Oh, I'm done with my cake, by the way. It was delicious. But it's tough. Doing the rundown and going through the actual episode is great, but this general thoughts section, it's I just repeat myself again, the last 4 or 5 episodes, just oh yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm not sure if this is my actual favorite episode of the show yet. I was really high on the Looking Glass and nostalgia episodes, as we've talked about. But if I were to pick, not having seen the finale, obviously, but as of now, if I were to pick one to be the Emmy consideration episode, this would be it. For writing and directing. When TV shows do that, they pick one episode as their flagship or whatever for consideration for all the tech awards, things like that. I think this would clearly be the one. Eric, you do the rundown, so you may have appreciated it even more than Chad and I did, because you're taking the notes and you're going to guide us through this episode. But what a winding tapestry, if tapestries can wind, this episode is going back and forth throughout time and really trying to have the show's perspective be from Dr. Manhattan, who experiences time in a way that we just can't understand, we can't relate to at all. And yet this episode somehow makes that experience like it's trackable. Like you can track with what is going on. I think multiple moments in this episode really feel just perfect. I don't know if I want to spoil them now or just wait till we get to the point in the rundown, but there's at least 2 or 3 moments where I realize what's happening, and it's just, oh my God, that's what they're doing. That's what this is. And it's incredible. Yeah. So, I mean, this is, and I'm glad that Eric brought up Twin Peaks again, because, I mean, looking back over the last several years, last decade, whatever, I mean, for me, like, I'm already, without even seeing the finale, it's like, I got Twin Peaks, I got Better Call Saul, I maybe like BoJack Horseman better than everybody else, and Watchmen. Like, this is better than so many other shows that I've watched. Like, I'm already willing to put it up there as this is the best TV, some of the best that TV's had to offer us in years. And I had no idea. It's not better than Twin Peaks: The Return. It's not number 1, but like how close it is, considering, I mean, we did that show for years talking about Twin Peaks, considering the event that was and how special and impactful and monumental that was. The fact that this is even in the conversation, like approaching some of the best, is saying something in and of itself. So yes, a broken record, obviously. I don't see myself calming down at all in this show. Another amazing episode. I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but maybe the most perfect. I don't know. It fucking ruled.
I want to say my favorite part of this is probably the playing with time and how they bounce around on that. As you know, Eric, from anytime we've ever talked about like any of my Stargate stuff that I'm into, some of my favorite episodes are the ones that play with time. Lots of times it's time travel. Now, this wasn't specifically time travel. In a way, you could say it is, because Dr. Manhattan experiences time, as you've already said clearly, Christian, completely different than the rest of us. He kind of is experiencing it all at once, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's probably some of my favorite stuff about this episode. I really enjoyed the whole thing. I don't know if it's my favorite episode. I think there's a few other that I may have, at least one other that I may have enjoyed a little bit more, but that could change on a subsequent rewatch of everything, because you'll start to pick up on different things. I also just really enjoyed, I guess learning the love story of the two, of Angela and Abar, or Dr. Manhattan, John, whatever you want to call him, whatever name he wants to go by today. It was kind of interesting to see how it happened, and how would you feel experiencing a love that you knew exactly how it was going to begin and exactly how it was going to end? It's sort of a weird thing to think about, and he knows it all, and it's almost like he has to let it happen regardless. It's almost like, because he can't change it. Do you know what I'm saying? He said this is the way it's going to be, and it's the way it has to be, I guess. So yeah, I really like how they did Dr. Manhattan. I think we were all a little worried about, like, how are they going to do that? What are they going to do? And I think they did it in a very good way, which we'll get more into later, I'm sure. And yeah, it's just overall pretty solid episode. And I do like the play on words. A God walks into a bar. We have to give 100% credit to Randy out there for pointing that out. I took a picture. The picture I sent to you, Eric, I meant to actually put into the Watchmen feed, but I'd already sent it to you. I'm like, I'll just leave it there. But when it came up, I saw it, I paused it, I literally took a photo, and I didn't want to send it out right away because I didn't want you guys to see that before you watched it. But anyhow, so I sent it to you earlier today, Eric, and it's just I don't know. I thought it was a really fun, I guess, play on words. I still think Excalibur is going a little far, but I still like it.
And yeah, that's
pretty great.
That's Glenn, by the way, Chad.
Glenn.
Yeah.
Glenn. I don't know why I was thinking Randy. I think Randy tweeted us this week or something like that. But yeah, Yeah, sorry, Glenn. It's yeah. I mean, if you think about Excalibur, even a little bit more, considering it's Laurie's, it's even more mind blowing, probably for her too. But anyhow.
All right, so let's run this down. It's not going to be standard here. I think what I'm going to do is we'll just talk about the John/Angela stuff, and then we'll just clean up all the Vite stuff at the end. So we'll skip around a little bit. The backdrop through line of this episode is them talking in this bar on some anniversary of her parents being killed on the VVN or whatever holiday. So I'm not going to get into all the love, just discussion back and forth there, unless there's something in particular I have bullet pointed here. But basically the first thing we get into here is Manhattan's creation of Europa. So he just decides to basically create the Garden of Eden on Europa, the moon of Jupiter. We clearly see how the atmosphere or dome or whatever it is kind of laid out here. We see him creating. He creates his Adam and Eve basically from the microorganisms in the water, apparently. So we see him raise the first two fetuses from the water, transports this manor, English manor, we get the backstory on, takes in wayward Jews from Germany trying to escape the Nazis in 1936. John witnesses, of course, the lady and lord of the manor getting freaky. And that is, of course, their likenesses for Crookshanks and Phillips. They do pull him aside, give him a little bit of a religious talk, give him a Bible, make him promise to create something nice or beautiful and send him on his way. And this is kind of his answer to that, apparently. Like I said, so basically the Garden of Eden here. And yeah, I guess we can stop there for the first segment here. So yeah, get a lot of explanation right there in that first 5 minutes or so, Christian.
Yeah, big stuff. Not too much to comment on with the, well, okay, I guess one thing, because most of the Dr. Manhattan and Angela stuff in the bar is kind of this meet cute, but most of the payoff, you don't realize why it's significant until way later in the episode.
Yeah.
But I guess I do have one question. Obviously, we know that later in the episode, it's the actor who plays Cal's face as Dr. Manhattan. But in this first meeting, he alleged, or we assume he has a different face. Like, he doesn't look like Cal. And so how that's visualized, like, this is what we were talking about last week. You know, what are they going to do? Is it just going to be all CG? Is it going to look like Billy Crudup? What are they going to do? And since they do end up showing the Cal Dr. Manhattan later in the episode, for these scenes, he's just kind of obscured, and you see his face through like a wine glass, or you just see his hands and chest. I thought that was pretty clever. On first watch, it was kind of like, it was really teasing. The second time, I guess, since I knew that there was so much Dr. Manhattan coming, when I watched it the second time, I was like, all right, it's fine. Did you guys find that frustrating at all? Did you think it was perfect? What did you think of them not showing Dr. Manhattan's face in that first portion?
It was worth it for him to mess with you a little bit, because that was clearly his voice. I thought so. I was like, God, are they really not going to show him? And yeah, it was super curious about it the whole time, for sure.
Did we ever look up to see who the voice of him was during that? Because it'd be interesting to see. Because
no, it's definitely him.
Yeah, it's him for sure.
Oh, it's the same guy doing the same voice.
Yeah,
doing the voice,
which is weird, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
He did a great job then, because I couldn't tell.
When Dr. Manhattan takes the Cal's face, this is confusing. When they're in that morgue or whatever, and they like choose what his likeness is going to be, and then when he assumes Cal's face for the first time, Angela says something like, "Oh, your voice is different." And I guess it is a little deeper, but Eric, you and I were hearing the same thing. When in those first scenes, it sounds exactly like Cal. So I was a little confused on what Angela's line there meant. I guess he sounds a little bit like higher pitched.
It's a little different. It's
softer.
Noticeably different, but it's clearly him. There's no doubt in my mind.
definitely still the same voice. I guess so. In those first scenes, I thought maybe I was kind of pre-annoyed, like if they didn't show Dr. Manhattan's face in the whole episode, and we only got these like Austin Powers sight gag type things going on, that may have been frustrating. But since that pays off, then it's really fine. Oh man, I didn't even talk about what Eric set up for. Seeing the Europa and all that. I mean, the way this episode fills in the blanks is just so perfect. It's like, yeah, of course, Dr. Manhattan built this paradise on Europa.
Yeah.
Like, obviously. Like, what else could it be? It's like I never once thought that. But now that I know that's what happens, it just fits perfectly. And there's going to be lots of examples, but this is the first one where this episode does such an amazing job of humanizing Dr. Manhattan. And the idea that he creates life and it's based off of this like defining moment that he had as a child, and he's remembered that. Obviously he experiences time differently now, but it happened as a child, like way before the experiment and him actually turning to Dr. Manhattan when he's John. Like he has this formative moment, and he's given this charge to make something beautiful, and then years later, that's like his inspiration for creating life. I think it's a really beautiful idea that's illustrated there, but it still doesn't even scratch the surface as how great this episode is at humanizing John, and we'll get more into that. I guess the other thing is, we see how it's perfect here. I guess since we know all the stuff about Veidt, I don't know how much time the next episode is going to spend on this. I guess we should assume that John created something perfect and Veidt corrupts it, and that's why it's no longer a utopia, right? I mean, that's the read, right? Like or are we thinking that he was unsuccessful in creating a utopia, just like Veidt was unsuccessful in creating a utopia in America?
Probably more the latter, I'd say.
That they just, neither of them were actually able to create something perfect, even though that's what they intended to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll buy that. But yeah, a ton of stuff right out of the gate. But all of it fits quite nicely.
Yeah. So Christian, you said something that kind of made me think. You said, of course he created it, and why wouldn't I have thought that? Why, and you're right. None of us really. I mean, we may have like dabbled the idea, but the idea is you have to have a reason why. And we didn't know the reason why he would have created it. And why would Veidt be there? We also need to know a reason why Veidt would have been there, which we only learn in this episode. So like without those puzzle pieces, I don't know. I guess it seems like a stretch without those pieces of the puzzle. Once you see those pieces of the puzzle, you go, oh, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. Well, as perfect a sense as growing babies underwater can be, but I guess when babies are in the womb, they're essentially in water, so I guess maybe it's not that big of a stretch. But I like this scene. I loved seeing like the I guess you could say the genesis of the Europa colony. I thought it was pretty interesting. I also liked seeing where where he got the idea for Crookshanks and Phillips, and in a way I had a long-term possible ponder that I had come up with Phillips is made from DNA from John. Now, of course, it's not correct, but I was on target with saying with the fact that I guess Phillips was created by John, Although that's not what I meant by
Yeah.
that. I was thinking more that, it was Vite. But I don't know. It's just it's these little pieces that we try to put together, and then we come up with a theory. And sometimes we're a little close, but we're a little off, which I assume is probably exactly the way Vite's going to be, has been on a lot of things. So I thought it was great seeing where Crookshanks and Phillips came from. I kind of almost wish we could have seen a little more just to see. And also we find out, is it too early to say we find out who the, we'll save that for later. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this whole start. I mean, I guess if you want to talk a little bit more about what I thought about the whole thing with, with Abar / Dr. Manhattan, it was good too, I guess. I don't know.
All right, so Christian, the next bullet point I have here you've already alluded to, and I think this is the scene that just has a weird taste to it for some reason. The scene where they pick the Cal likeness from him. I don't understand why she pulls out the other three and basically is trying to force him to pick one of them. And then pulls out the one she really wanted and is like this one. So I guess that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why not just pull out the one you want? Because clearly John doesn't care. So I don't know. Did you guys pick up on anything?
I don't understand that.
Yeah, I thought it was a little odd.
No,
weird.
It plays like she's embarrassed to be most interested in or most attracted to the black guy, which I don't know why. I don't get why. I don't know why that would be the case. But that's how it plays. It seems like, oh well, choose 1, 2, or 3. But it's like, oh man, the one I really want is this guy. And it's like, well, why not just do that in the first place? Like,
and
what
honestly,
reason would you have to not?
If you look at the other ones, there's no real reason for him to choose any of the other ones other than the one that he ends up choosing anyhow. Yeah. I mean, it's like she said, let me give you the slobs, and then here's this guy. He had some issues, but he's pretty clean cut.
Yeah.
And I happen to be attracted to him most, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, a weird scene overall, but he does, as he becomes Cal, it is pretty neat with the, he's got the symbol on his head, and you just have this, he just has this glow about him that's it's really convincing to me. I don't know. I think he is fantastic as Dr. as Cal Manhattan or whatever, Cal Hatton or whatever we want to call him or whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that here, because I mean, I don't know when the best point to bring it up is, but I mean, it's so strange because if you had asked us after like episode 4 or 5 or whatever, we probably would have been pretty down on Cal as a character. I know we were talking, like trying to figure out some theories and things like that, but he was mostly just kind of weird, and we had questions about him. And obviously most of those have been answered by now, but I wouldn't have brought up like that performance of that character at all, pretty far into the series. And now, like, this is a great performance and an even better like characterization, like bringing all this together when it comes to the Angela relationship and him as Manhattan. Like, it just all fits perfectly. And it was kind of like right underneath our nose the whole time. Like, he's been here, he's been in the whole series, but we didn't even really know what we had at that point.
One thing I kind of noticed is that, and maybe this is off point, but he, and by he I mean John / Dr. Manhattan, wants a woman that's broken. Do you know what I'm saying? It always seems like he chooses these girls that are somewhat broken or somewhat needs, I don't know, they need some sort of help from him. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't know. I see where you're going. I mean, I guess I have some thoughts for when this all kind of wraps up, but I don't know if he actually orchestrated any of the him and Angela stuff is kind of my read, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because it's how we experience this time. It's all kind of preordained anyhow. So
right.
All right, so we're back into the present day, or not present day, but the flashback to their first meeting in the bar. We find out the 10 years. They're going to be in a relationship for 10 years. His main goal in this conversation is to get her to have dinner with him the next day. So 10-year relationship that tragically ends. This is where the favorite song bit comes on the jukebox, Tunnel of Love. So it's 10 years, kind of like a tunnel. Dr. Manhattan can't see that 10 years, but he knows that Angela's at the beginning of it and at the end. So that's where the tunnel reference comes. He keeps alluding to a 6 months in the future fight they will have as they're shortly after they have sex. We cut to that. By this time in the relationship, 6 months later, she is clearly frustrated with John and his perception of things, and John being John, basically. We've seen basically all the women that have had relationships with him have the same issues, but like he predicts, she tells him to take off. He does so and heads to Antarctica, which we will skip over and get to at the end. But any thoughts here on this bar discussion, or I think it's the only real thing I have to say about the love scene and the argument and stuff is I think they're both at the top of their acting games in this scene. Johnny boy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, these scenes are so interconnected. It's so hard to kind of, I can't remember exactly which part. I think it might have been during this portion. And I can't remember exactly what they're talking about, but Angela asks a question, and John, Cal, Dr. Manhattan, whatever, all of his names, he responds, "If I told you that it wouldn't be your idea," which I think clearly comes into play later in the episode. So that's good foregrounding there. And then they also set up this chicken and egg thing that's going to pay off later as well. And nothing goes unnoticed in this episode for sure. But I think particularly like throughout this episode, but where I felt it the most this early in the episode after that sex scene and the argument between Cal and Angela. Dr. Manhattan is a god. He's referred to as a god all the time. The title of this episode is an allusion to him as a god. In a way, I think we've touched on this before, or we've definitely touched on this before. There's this comparison with Dr. Manhattan and Superman, and the kind of conundrum when it comes to Superman stories always is trying to make him vulnerable, because on the surface, Superman is so indestructible. He's so powerful that, you know, besides kryptonite, like what could you use to weaken him? And kryptonite, you know, also just seems kind of silly. It's like you're an all-powerful god, and then this rock crumbles you. So it's like this balance. And there's obviously lots of good Superman stories, but that's kind of like the problem that you have to solve when it comes to telling a good story. And if we're looking at Dr. Manhattan as a Superman type character, I think this episode overall in lots of different ways does such a great job of making someone who's all powerful vulnerable. And like this is one of those first moments where it's like he's clearly still omniscient and he has all of this knowledge and power, but this relationship dynamic is such that it's able to kind of penetrate through some of that and get to some actual emotion from someone that we probably didn't think that was even possible for. I know I'm talking about like emotional depth, and I was talking about Superman's like physical strength, things like that. So I get that's not the perfect comparison, but this idea of needing to take a character who's mostly perfect and try to find cracks or try to find perspectives with which to see that character to get more feeling, more drama out of it. I think that this show does really well. This episode does really well. And I think that this scene in particular is like the first great example of that here.
Kind of gives you a hint of what the eggs were all about.
Oh yeah. I
mean, big time.
Yep.
I didn't mind it. I liked seeing the argument. I like the fact that he kind of, I don't want to say forces her, but he doesn't tell her what to do and allows it to just happen. And but it kind of makes you wonder what would happen if he told her and it wasn't necessarily her idea. I mean, what if he, if he can experience all this time and know what's going to happen, why can't he change it? Why is it so preordained? I don't know. It's very very interesting. And you're right, top of their acting skills there. They did a great job.
So the next scene back in the bar gives us some foreshadowing, I'm pretty sure, for the next episode. And I'll definitely have some Christian ponders along this line. But this next sequence, he tells her how their future is in Tulsa, because she tells him that 6 months from now. She tells him, if you're Dr. Manhattan, well, create some life, prove it to me. So he does the egg trick here. So in this discussion, we learn that he can pass his powers along, but he would never do it to somebody without their permission. And if he would project his power or whatever onto some kind of organic object, he could pass it along that way. So she deduces that basically you can put your power in some food or an egg or something, somebody else could eat it and have your power or whatever. And he says, yeah, that's theoretically the case. So yeah, so I think that might come into play in the future. I guess we can move right along into the device. We'll come back around on the device and the Vite thing. I was wrong. I thought we would just kind of leave that thing she pulls out of Cal's head behind. I thought we were just going to accept what that did and move on. But no, pretty crazy backstory on this device or whatever. But we cut to the flashback now where after their fight, he comes with this device, explains to her how it works, and she basically activates it. So this is where Cal Hatton actually becomes Cal. So
this episode is so well written. Something that I love. There was a shot, or there was a moment in the bar scene where John mentions a ring. I'm just going to keep going back between John and Cal. Everyone can just stay with me, all right? I don't know which one is correct. He mentions a ring, and Angela's like, oh, so we're engaged? And he says, like, in a matter of speaking or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like they set up this wedding, like, theme or whatever. And then we see the scene with the device and John, and she says, would you like to get on one knee? And he says, I do. And so it's just like this backwards proposal. His line is, I do. So it's just like in multiple scenes across multiple timelines, there's this whole like marriage engagement thing, but none of it is how it normally works. Like, it's not the normal proposal or ring or marriage. Like, none of that actually goes how it normally would, how you would expect it to in a love story. But they use like this verbiage and make these connections to kind of like play with preconceived notions of how those things can go. I thought that was really elegant and well done. Here, because when he's kind of explaining, this is where it's kind of cross-cutting, where the device is going into John's head. And I believe this is where, again, it's hard to remember where these bar scenes line up with the rest of the stuff. But I believe this is where Angela makes that connection about the tunnel of love. Like John's saying that he can't see past that certain point. He can't see this moment. And she laughs to herself and she says, oh, it's like a tunnel. And this is one of those moments that for me, like once it sunk in, it's perfect. And there's an even better one that's coming, but this idea of Tunnel of Love plays, and he says it's her favorite song. She's never heard it before. And this, I think we know, I think we can all get from that, like, oh, like he knows it's going to have significance to her, but how that actually ties up within this same self-contained story that we see the first time she ever hears that song. And before that song is even over, like the first time she hears it, we understand the context of why it's so special to both of them. Not to mention that this was set up in a previous episode when she said, "Time to come out of the tunnel," when she's talking to Cal, I guess, at that point. So this was set up in a whole nother episode. And then over the course of an hour, this like 4-minute song just takes on all of this meaning because of the way that it's written and edited to kind of show the beginning of something and the end of the something. And us as the audience somehow have enough time to feel the weight of what all of that means. It's flawless, amazing perfection. I'm mind blown.
So yeah, the insertion of the device flashes us back to present day. So we're back now to where we left Angela at the end of last episode, as Cal, the new Cal Manhattan, the latest inhalation here, is coming to, trying to get his bearings. It seems as though he has retained some of Cal's memories. So he's some kind of mix of John and Cal at this point. We learn what happened at the White Knight. That didn't sit well with me at the time. God. Now we got it. So yeah, that guy that was just about to shoot her, John just by reflex removed him from the equation, and we'll circle back around to that in the Vite stuff as well. Yeah, she's frustrated because he's Dr. Manhattaning his way through the scene. She knows there's kind of dire circumstances here. He appears on the pool where the kids see him. He then whisks the kids away to Will for safekeeping or whatever. She asks him continually why he's walking around on the pool, and he specifically says, "You needed to see me do this. It's important for later." So we'll have to see how that ties in or whatever. But yeah, this is a pretty great scene here as well. So there will be a continuation of this. But how did you like the first blue Cal scene here, Christian?
I thought it was great. A couple of my favorite things actually what happened is where he's like, she says, "You remember what happened to the clock?" He's like, "The clock is broken. Do you remember what happened to the clock?" Because this whole thing is about time, and for him to come straight back to a clock, and then he says, "Yeah, I remember," and they do the flashback, and you see, and you're like, "Oh, damn, he remembers all that stuff." And then, and the kids watching him walk on and like, "Is that Cal? Is Cal walking on the water?" And they're like, and she's like, "Yeah, that's Cal," basically. And it was just, it was a great scene beginning to end. I liked his confusion in the beginning and how he's like, she's like, "What in the hell are you doing?" He's like, I'm making omelets or waffles or something.
Yeah.
And
that's later. We'll get to that.
Oh, is that later? Yeah, well, throwing them all together, I guess. But either way, I just liked seeing the initial confusion and him basically coming back to his own version of reality, and the little things that they bring up are just, they're good, they're perfect. And he flashes the kids out, and I've got some theories on the kids too for later. So
yeah, far out. We're on the same wavelength.
I really am glad that they went with the Cal actor to portray Dr. Manhattan. I know that was Eric's prediction. I think I mentioned in the last episode that it would be really cool if they did that, and turns out it was really cool. Yeah. I particularly like the blue makeup version of Cal as John, as Dr. Manhattan. I wanted to ask you guys, the glowy version, like the CG version that like floats around and stuff. I don't know if this is intentional or if I'm off, but it looks kind of bad. This show is really high production value, but that CG looks off somehow. Like the Billy Crudup Dr. Manhattan looks better than that, I think. Like the CG
Agreed.
Dr. Manhattan from the movie looks better than that CG.
You know what it
Dr.
reminded
Manhattan.
me
of?
I don't
know why.
You know what it reminded me of? This year's shitty remake of Aladdin. It reminded me.
The genie.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, this. Yeah, once the glow, when he turns off the glow, it's fine. But
yeah,
when the glow's there, it's
love,
weird.
Yeah, and that looks like it's all makeup. Like when it's the makeup version, it looks like perfect. But the glowy version just looks, when his eyes go white and he's like floating around. I don't know. It just looked kind of bad. Like I don't know. I was surprised. And I mean, I guess, hey, I have something to criticize this show that I'm fawning over, for the entire episode for weeks on end. But yeah, it's good stuff. I almost wasn't sure if we were going to get much current timeline stuff because there was so much backstory. I didn't know if we were going to get anything. Obviously, the bigger things we've yet to talk about, but I was excited to see we did move forward in the timeline. I don't know if you guys have ponders for this, but what the hell? I mean, I guess it's gonna happen. It's gonna be perfect, whatever happens in the next episode. But as of right now, I have no idea what, when he says you needed to see me do this, it's important for later. I have, like, that may be the most confusing. Like, what could that possibly mean? Why would him standing on the pool be important? Well, like, how could that imbue importance for her later on? I'm so lost on that. But again, I'm sure a week from now I'll be saying how perfect they ended up lining that up.
All right, so as we kind of tiptoe through time here, this is where we find out that Will has received, or has been bequeathed the estate of Captain Metropolis. So John, who needs to conduct some business with Will, goes to that house they have a discussion about an alliance John needs to make. We don't get all the details that we want, but we do know they have some kind of deal going. But here is an interesting cross point too, whereas at the same time he's back in the present day with Angela, who is basically talking to Will from 10 years ago, and asks Will why or how he knew about Judd Crawford, to which Will replies he did not know, but now he does. So Angela, with the realization that, oh shit, maybe this is all my fault. And yeah, the chicken and the egg kind of reference here perfectly basically sums up this conundrum. So I don't know. I guess we could theorize on that, whether, I don't know, we going with, did Angela really cause all this, or at least the death of Judd, or does it matter? Like, John seems to think it doesn't matter. I don't know. It feels to me a little bit to me like it's her fault, but I don't know. I'm no physicist.
I think it is.
Yeah, it could be. You could probably be called guilty for that, I would assume. So.
Right, but that's why it's a paradox, though, because she's only responding based on what's already happened in her timeline, or else she would never have said that. That's why it's paradoxical. And here, I think we have our final. There's more egg stuff to come, but I think this is the payoff for every egg nod that this entire series has had. Yeah. It's this idea of paradox, which I didn't realize it was going to be something as simple as what came first, the chicken or the egg, which maybe I've never fully appreciated as a paradoxical statement until watching this episode. It always just seemed like a dorky thing that people said. But here, like in this context, I think this moment is the reason this show has had so many eggs in it, is for this payoff. This is also two more. This is number 2 for me. And absolutely perfect moments when Angela is talking through John through 10 years time, like bending time on itself, and communicating with Will. This is such. I'm waiting to kick this to Chad in a minute here, but this is such hard sci-fi, just glorious ideas in writing here. And I think, again, just going to throw all the praise I can, one of the best examples of this. There's so much sci-fi. I mean, Chad mentioned time travel earlier in this episode, so I'm anxious to hear what he says here. But there's so much stuff about messing with time in sci-fi that just is so confusing, and even in things that are good, it's like, well, wait a second, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Maybe the best example is like the Terminator franchise, right? Which gets worse and worse as each subsequent entry in that series. But you even just look at the first like two movies or first movie or whatever, and it's like, okay, Kyle Reese has to go back in time to impregnate Sarah Connor and then John Connor in the future. It's just like, you start pulling on some of the stuff. It's like, wait, what? Like that doesn't make any, like, you had to go back to do this in order to do that, and then this other person's going to come back even earlier. It's if you start like poking at it, it falls apart. Like, no matter how great of a story like that you have, or Back to the Future, right? Like, oh, like for this moment, his mom's not dancing with the guy, so he's like fading out of existence. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. And even like I said, even in good things, you can still look at the idea or the science fiction behind it and call bullshit on it. But this, I found this so rewarding in the moment that Angela like basically incepted this idea into Will in the past unknowingly. I found it so satisfying of a reveal that even though it still doesn't make any sense, it's still a paradox. Like, there's no way to actually make sense of that. But I thought the way that was communicated was so well done that I forgive it all its paradoxical nature that I would still hold a tiny grudge about in so many other works. And here, I think it soars. It's awesome. This is another moment for me, 100% perfect. I love it. Chad, just talk to me about time travel stuff.
Yeah, well, you can't take it. I will totally agree with you. If you sit there and you try to, you can poke holes in any story like that. Like, that's the thing. I mean, it ruins it if you do that almost. You know what I'm saying? You got to sort of take it as it is. And I will point out, this really isn't. I know I brought up time travel earlier. None of this is really time travel. In a way, he is time. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. He is everything around. So it's kind of different than time travel. But yes, in order for him to be at that point right then and there with Angela, he had to be talking to Will 10 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? And they were having that conversation at the exact same moment, but 10 years apart in time. So it is a lot to wrap your mind around. And I'm okay with that. I'm 100% okay with that. I mean, I've seen other things that are way worse that I'm still okay with. You know what I'm saying? And she did create her own chicken and egg because of it. Do you know what I'm saying? And if it really is a form of time travel, that's why they say you shouldn't really mess with it, because it affects things. It affects everything. I mean, there's like, even look at like, I don't know, people find the Butterfly Effect to be a pretty horrible movie, and I actually really kind of enjoy it if you take it as a movie the way it is, and basically the whole thing of like the chaos theory and the fact that like the flutter of a butterfly's wings can affect something millions of miles away. You know what I'm saying? If you're thinking like that into it, it's I don't know. It is definitely a great scene, and I'm with you in the fact that it is 100% just gold the way they did that, and jaw dropping too. Like, I was like, oh shit, no way. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's like, and now you got to see how this goes, because she basically has to now live with the knowledge that she created it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. And and we may see this a little bit differently after the next episode. Like, they could add even more like texture to this. I think it's great writing, but I also think it's Regina King. Like, the way she performs learning that information is like, I'm so with her in that moment, and in the way like those lines are read, that I think that's part of what makes it such a perfect moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's other examples I can think of in like sci-fi that I've seen where like, I was just watching an episode of, let's talk about Stargate all the time, but an episode of Stargate, I don't even remember the name of the episode. Doesn't really matter, but they basically need this thing called a 0-point molecule. But the only place that they know of that one exists in time was like, I don't know, 5,000 years ago in some part of Egypt before some big revolt. So like there's this whole paradoxical moment where they go and they end up leaving it. They end up getting stuck there, and they leave it in a cave, and all this other stuff happens with this time travel stuff. And long story short, they left it there for themselves to find later, and they didn't even have to go on the mission that they went on to get it. So if you want to talk about like a mind-bending thing, that's sort of like, wait, so they went on this whole mission, but they didn't end up ever actually going on it because they didn't have to, because they just found it 5,000 years later that they left for themselves. If you think too much about it, you ruin it.
Well, we're not quite done with eggs yet because John is hungry, guys. He's got to go make some waffles quick.
Waffles.
Which leads to the revelation that the cavalry's outside. They have a transporting gun, basically, that they're going to use to teleport me against my will. She goes out and tries to stop it anyway. I do love kind of the ego of John here, as we all know he could pretty much just like do one, whip of his hand and these guys all just disappear or whatever. But he goes out and he artfully stops the bullets and flicks their heads off. And this is pretty fun little John action scene here. But ultimately, they do succeed, and John is teleported away. And man, is that going to be fun as he appears in that box with Lori sitting there, guys. Can't wait for that next week. Watching the breakfast scene the second time made my mind jump back to the last time we saw the breakfast scene when Cal was giving that "there's no God, there's no heaven," and how that kind of carries a little more water than it did before. So, yeah. Any thoughts on the action set piece here, Christian?
Well, yeah, I didn't see it similar to you. As obviously, John has a lot more power. Like he's more powerful than he's letting on in that moment. Obviously, he's doing super powerful stuff, but he's showing off a little bit. And if you realize he's been Cal for a decade, he's flexing, right? He's getting back into Dr. Manhattan mode. He's slipping back into that mode. It's been, how long since the Vietnam War or whatever, when he's let loose. So he's coming back into his own. But great scene, great final moment between John and Angela again. In between all that stuff, in between the eggs and the vaporizing, is my final perfect moment, which we've kind of talked about already, but because this episode's so interconnected. But just to put a finer point on it, when John explains while he's baking that the cavalry's already there and there's no way to stop them. Like there's no way to stop them. And Angela, tries to push back, but he's like, no, seriously, there's nothing that can be done. And she immediately goes, all right, you stay here and I'm going to go save your ass, or whatever she said.
Hold on, let me move the painting. I got a bunch of shit back there with some ammo in it.
Right. So she goes and gets her Sister Knight gear and ammo and all that stuff. And John kind of looks at her and has this, he's got this look in his eye, this moment. And Angela notices it too. This is also just brilliant acting by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Just absolutely fantastic moment. And she asked him, what? What is it? What's going on? She's questioning why he has this look on his face. And he goes, the first day we met, you asked about the moment that I fell in love with you. This is the moment. I told you couldn't save me, and you immediately tried to go save me anyway. And this is the moment I fell in love with you. And I love that in the short term, in the immediate aftermath of that, it undercuts that emotion, because she's like, that's supposed to be romantic. We've been together for this long and now you fall in love with me, which is funny. But then like when it cut, like when you like let that breathe, I think it might even cut back to the bar at some point around here. When you just let that, because I was asking myself this episode, let me go back a step. I was like, okay, this is clever and stuff when we're starting to kind of fill in the gaps and things start to make sense over the course of this conversation in the bar. But I was asking myself during this, I was like, but wait a second, like, why would John go to her? Like, why her in particular? Was this all planned? Was this all orchestrated? Why wouldn't he go find Lori or something? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? And this is what Chad and I were, we hinted at this before, but the way I read it is it's like, there wasn't anything special, like there wasn't anything destined about that. It just so happened when he sat down in front of her the first time, he knew and felt the totality of their relationship in that moment. So it was like a self-fulfilling importance for that relationship, even though there wasn't anything there wasn't anything that I don't think that like drew him to her, but because it was her and they had such a large chunk of their life together, that's what gave it that importance. And this idea that he always loved her, I couldn't really express that in a way that made sense, but we somehow are able to get that through the course of this episode of, yes, he technically fell in love with her way later, but he felt that the whole time. Like he knew what that moment felt like. In that first conversation is just such brilliant writing, so elegantly done. I do think it's romantic. Like, this is a successful love story, for crying out loud, in Watchmen, in this universe. We talked so many in the first few episodes about how dark and depressing the show is and the world of Watchmen is, and maybe we should be bracing for a bunch of punches in the gut in the next episode. But for right now, this does not seem that dark, and there was a beautiful love story somehow near the end of this arc in this series, and and finding out the moment that John fell in love with Angela is the final perfect moment for me in this episode. I almost couldn't believe how beautiful that was in its writing and its emotion. Just fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant writing for sure.
Yeah, I did like that part. I thought it was, in a way, it's interesting because he says that's the moment, but he's lived that moment the whole entire time. So like, he already knew it. Well, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting paradox if we're talking about some of the paradoxes. So when he's outside, basically taking people down, are their heads exploding, or are they just disintegrating into thin air? Or like what's happening to these people?
Looks like they're like exploding to me.
Almost exploding. I mean, it's pretty much what he did to Rorschach, right?
Yeah.
So
instead of the head, he just blew Rorschach up completely. But
yeah.
Same. Yeah, but I just took it as the same thing.
I mean, if there's one little hole, and I don't even know if it's a hole, but he, he says we can't stop this yet. He comes out and he kills everybody, and he knows that where everybody is, he gets all these people, but yet he leaves a couple of these people that are there to like suck him into their machine. I just thought that was a little, I don't know, odd. I get it. It's all kind of preordained, and it all kind of has to happen. And that's why it happens. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. He knew the machine was there. He could have taken out the machine too. So it's, I don't know, a little weird, but I'm also pretty sure a lot of that we'll see kind of in the next episode, the final episode.
Yeah, so, I'm pretty sure
definitely.
He's got complete
plan.
Yeah, definitely got reasons for what he's letting happen here.
So I think it's the most unfortunate thing then is the fact that Angela has to go through it. And he doesn't see any way of doing anything other than basically forcing her to have to go through it. So.
Yep. All right, so we end up here in the bar once again, where she decides to hell with it. I will go to dinner with you tomorrow, but she is kind of bummed. So why should I waste my time if this is just going to end in tragedy? And I don't know if they bootlegged this from somewhere else, but I think this basically doesn't every relationship end in tragedy technically.
Yeah.
That's totally a brilliant thing to say there. Again, that's probably, they may have bootlegged that. I'd be surprised if that isn't something that was out there somewhere. But that's brilliant, and that's great. It's perfect to incorporate.
Perfectly
in the
placed.
show. Yeah. So, because immediately you're like, yeah, that's true. That's true. So now you don't know so even though it seemed super ominous the whole show that this tragedy was going to be extremely terrible, that maybe chipped away at it a little bit. Gives you a little cause to say, hey, maybe it won't be so bad, but whatever. So yeah, any final thoughts here on Dr. Manhattan and Angela before we move to Vightland?
No, sorry, I was just gonna say I can't wait until next episode. I mean, I don't know where this stuff is gonna end up, but I mean, I don't know, with so many things that still have to be wrapped up. But I mean, this episode was so perfect between Angela and John that where we're gonna go from here, finding out what I would take to be like the final version of John's plan of seeing where all this is going. Can't wait.
All right, so you mentioned back before where would be the perfect time to talk about the acting and and Cal here specifically. To me, it's this. I think him in Antarctica is where I was like, man, because John's kind of weird childlike mannerisms and stuff, and this guy has got that down so perfectly. I think he's just perfect Dr. Manhattan here. But so yeah, John at one point heads out to Antarctica to see what Adrian Veidt's up to. He's still hanging out at Karnak, which is definitely more run down these days. He's disgusted with the human race for their bombs and their goddamn meltdowns and all the shit that he gave them the pathway to utopia. They're not taking it. He's disheveled. He's pissed at humanity. John arrives. They have a little bit of a conversation. This is where we see Adrian programming a little squid rain for wherever it's sending it. I didn't write it down because I was thinking about writing it down, but where he says something like instilling fear one cephalopod at a time or something. So, yeah, some great line like that.
Yeah.
So that's great. And even this is our penis scene here too, and I think that's done really well as well. So
how could you tell it was me?
Yeah, that is a great joke that John just doesn't get the nudity thing, guys. But yeah, we have your elephant reference here, Christian, where I don't understand at all. But
what could it possibly be? Like, yeah, I'm so lost. Like, this is maybe as confusing as the. No, I think the John on the water thing, I'm less like, that seems so important. Maybe this is just a throwaway, but it probably isn't because everything's been paid off so well. But why is there this elephant floating in that thing? Like, it feels like such a tease given the little bit of elephant in the last episode, but in a very key way. Like, what the hell are you getting at, right? Like, yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing I could think if I'm trying to pull on that string is, well, I mean, I guess the nostalgia thing was his originally, and the elephant tied into nostalgia. So maybe some of his work or research had to do with elephants when it came to the original version of nostalgia. And that's just what Lady True continued on in her story.
It's not like we're going to get into this in the show at this point, but I guess I have this whacked out theory that for some reason elephants are used as like a database for people's nostalgia. So they extract these memories and they send them to Veidt Industries or whatever to have their nostalgia pills made. And I think Veidt Industries is like data banking everybody's memories with these elephants or whatever. It doesn't make any goddamn sense, but that's my
why would that be necessary? Like, if you could put memories into a pill, why would you need an elephant involved?
Yeah, I don't know.
If Vite and True could explain that all to me, inject me with something so I learn all that, that'd be great.
So yeah, they're discussing, basically John's got a new girlfriend. He's there to basically see if Adrian can help him become more mortal. To which Adrian's got a great idea that apparently he had designed 30 years ago. Of course he did. But we learn about the device here and all that it does, and the fact that it will let him reflexively defend himself in life-threatening situations and stuff. The science and whatever. I think this is all just brilliant sci-fi writing here. And so goddamn true to this character and these characters that it may as well be Alan Moore writing this, as far as I'm concerned. Let's see. Yeah, he created it 30 years ago, and that's where he tells John that before you insert this, you better take care of any business that you want to before that. And then we learn that Adrian's not happy, guys. He wants a favor in return. He knows about the Europa thing, because of the elephants, apparently, have been keeping him informed on that. It's a utopia. John left it as is. Have these two beings on there that just want to serve me constantly. It's boring to me. I don't have any interest in it. Adrian says, oh man, that sounds like paradise. And John offers to send him there, to which Adrian agrees. And John does indeed send him there. There's that. And then, before we go to the post-credit sequence, guys, any thoughts on, the Antarctica scene here?
It starts to explain like a lot more about, how he got to where he went. And, Vite confuses me. I mean, I think he confuses everybody. I think he confuses himself. He seems like a man with a plan, but yet he's not happy with where he is and what he's doing. He wants to go to this so-called utopia, that he knows about. And then he gets there, and as we've learned, he's not even really happy there. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And his whole conversation with John and basically, getting John ready, saying, hey, go take care of whatever you need to take care of. And that basically is what leads John to go off and talk to Will and do all these other things. It's it's interesting. And apparently we learn he really is on Europa. So I don't know. It's a lot of information. You're right, Eric. I don't know how to digest it all.
Yeah, I have a grand theory on Vite, but I'll wait till we're done running down the post-credit scene, tie that in. But I don't know. I think he's up to something here. But Christian, your thoughts on Antarctica? Good, thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's John going to the Fortress of Solitude, and he's naked, and it's a great performance. I mean, the line about like nuclear technology and, they keep making bombs because ironically it makes them feel more safe. Like that's a really like perfect, like character appropriate type line. The Vite stuff is all great. I mean, this stuff all fits so perfectly, but you guys realize it was just a week ago that the device came out of Cal's head and we had no idea what the fuck was going on. That was 1 episode ago. Like we had no idea what that was, how it worked, what it meant. Like it was all like completely out of nowhere. And then in this episode, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Vite. Okay, cool. Yeah, Vite made that, and then Angela put it in his head. Yeah, and that's why Cal's accident. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that all makes perfect sense. It just, I feel like we're taking for granted to some degree just like how perfect this all fits into place, considering how mind-altering it was in just the previous episode.
All right, so after the credits, we first kind of come in as Vite is getting at least one of his punishments. I don't know if this is the ultimate punishment. But it appears, as the scene plays out, all these people want is Adrian to stick around and hang out.
He'll stay.
They just don't want him to leave. As they ask him whether he's going to stay, he says no. They are smashing his tomatoes in his face. Good stuff there. We flash to him in the jail cell where we're going back to fog dancing again. We hit fog dancing twice in 2 episodes here. So he's reading the book this time.
Yeah.
Says it's a book he loves. It's about loneliness or whatever. The game warden visits him with the cake that Crookshanks and Phillips insisted on making for him. We're at 6 or 7. This must be 7 now. I kept trying to count. I think it's 7.
It's hard to count the candles.
Because six would have been the 365th day of the trial, so I think we moved a year ahead of that at this point, but who knows. So we learned that the game warden was basically the first fetus out of the water or whatever. And there's a little bit I want to talk about with that before we end up here. But this place is heaven, Adrian. Why wouldn't you want to be here? And we find out that Adrian's, I'm not needed here. I'm needed back with my 8 billion children over at Earth. So I have got to get back out of here and save the day over there. Yeah, so we find out that the horseshoe's in the cake. I have no goddamn idea what he's gonna do with this horseshoe besides just jacking it on the stone floor. I don't know what's going on, but apparently that was the plan all along. So that's why
that was the first episode is when we saw the horseshoe. How is that possible?
So that's my overriding theory now on Veidt is, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go so far as to say he's like orchestrating the Cyclops stuff, but I feel like clearly it was his plan to be sent to wherever for 7 years, get out at the exact time to do something. It's clearly going to line up with what's going to happen in this episode. But to me, the biggest clue is the horseshoe, where he, early on he keeps telling him, we don't need that yet. We don't need that yet, or whatever. Not yet. And here, this must be yet, apparently. So Veidt's had this plan some kind of plan in his mind this whole time. I feel like John is just a tool that he used. Now, again, I don't know if he's part of Cyclops or he's on the other end of that's going to try and stop Cyclops or whatever. But I feel like we get the scene of him so disgusted with humanity that he has set something else in motion, and maybe he goes off the grid to let the cavalry stuff percolate for the right amount of time. Now he's going to get back, and he's got to have something to do with what is going on here. So the horseshoe, my biggest clue that Adrian has been orchestrating. And I still don't understand. We don't have any idea of this hierarchy, or why is the game warden in charge of him? Because to me, it felt like he was just getting transported back to the two of them waiting for him. What's this, your captivity stuff and the agreements, the parameters of our agreements and all that other stuff. There were agreements. I thought John just sent you there, so because you asked him to.
Game warden is, I think he's self-appointed. It's like, I don't know if they're, you know what I'm saying? I think he just one day said, I'm going to be the game warden.
I think he was the first guy there. I feel like Veidt Veidt wanted an adversary or something. So I think my thinking is Veidt just set all this up himself. But he clearly had to build that incubating machine because John wouldn't have needed that. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Even though we feel like we know the Veidt stuff now, there is a lot we don't. So
yeah.
You sound right, Eric, but it's also it would be an interesting thing if we see that Veidt was basically kind of in control or orchestrating everything, because over all of these scenes he seems so frustrated or so I don't know, just killing all of the Crookshanks and Phillips, and how it took him what we take it to mean years to figure out how to get bodies out of the atmosphere and onto Europa, all this stuff. It seems like a lot of frustration that he felt for him to have ultimately been in control. But I don't know how else to take this horseshoe thing from the first episode to here. And what is he doing? Is he like Andy Dufresne himself out of prison? What is going
exactly
on?
What I thought. He just needs a poster of the prettiest girl in town,
The Shawshank reference. What is happening? But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I almost just went into my ponder about this stuff, but I realized we haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, this is all weird. I'm very confident I'll come back and talk about how perfect the finale was. But at this moment, it's like, how could they wrap all of this up?
It's going to have to do with the Millennium Clock. It has to. I don't know how yet.
Or the Millennium Falcon.
Or the Millennium Falcon.
That would be some shit right there. Maybe that was what crash landed the Millennium Falcon. All right, guys, so let's do it. Let's get into the Christian Ponders segment for the final episode of Season 1 of Watchmen. So no second chance points on these picks, guys, but I think we're pretty zero focused here on resolutions of what could happen. So there's some points to be had here. So Christian, I assume you're going for your typical 3. So what do you got, man?
Yeah, I mean, you set that up as if like we know what to predict. I had a hell of a time trying to figure out what to predict for this episode. I think some of my ones for this episode might come back into play next time, so maybe some second chance points will come through. We'll see. But the one I almost like dove into ahead of time was so the Europa stuff. I guess we don't have to call it Vitland anymore since we know where they're at. But the Europa stuff, I don't know why. I'm thinking that, obviously Vite has to get from there into the main story. Like, there's no way he's going to just be on Europa the whole time. So that's the obvious one. That's not worth predicting or whatever. But I've tried to figure out the best way to word this. Crookshanks and Phillips are going to interact with someone who isn't Vite or Dr. Manhattan, meaning either Crookshanks and Phillips go with Vite to Earth or someone else goes to Europa. So there's going to be someone whom they've never interacted with before that interacts with them in some way. So they're coming to Earth or someone's going there, something like that. That's
out there. I like it.
That's what I'm thinking there. Eric hinted a little bit. Again, like the obvious thing, clearly there's going to be a Laurie John moment. I think that we know is coming, and I'm looking forward to it. But I'm going to try and be real specific and say that at some point we're going to get a fuck you from Laurie to John. Maybe a fuck off. I want to caveat maybe a fuck off, but something like that.
I say we just give it to him if she says fuck something to John.
Yeah. Something related with fuck and John. Some combination of that, I think is going to happen.
You got it.
Finally, I don't know. I don't even know what the chalk is. I don't know what the safe money is on. Like I have no idea if this is bold or if this is like the most boring prediction. I feel like it could go either way. So maybe there is no safe money. But I'm going to say Dr. Manhattan dies in this last episode.
He what?
He dies. He's dead.
Oh,
okay.
All right.
Oh. Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah. All right. So if I'm going to go second here, then I'll just say my third prediction was John. Okay, so I'm going to word this differently. I'm going to say John Osterman dies. My second prediction, I think he is going to probably pass his powers to either Angela or probably more likely Topher. And I think that's, for whatever reason, whoever gets his power is going to have to walk on some water because that's important for later or whatever. But I'm going to get specific. Well, yeah. So he's going to pass his powers to somebody in his immediate family, and I think he's going to do it via an egg. So I think the egg thing is going to pay off. So those are my two kind of out there predictions, that John's going to die, not necessarily Dr. Manhattan. I think the essence of him might go on through somebody else, but John Osterman's going to die.
So there's not going to be any version, John, Cal, no version of him is going to be alive, but like the power of essence of Dr. Manhattan will live on.
I don't.
Okay.
My actual prediction is John Osterman died. The rest of that stuff is just a tale, but because I think Angela or somebody is going to have basically be the new Dr. Manhattan. Is what I'm thinking. Yeah,
well, I think we kind of agree then, because like I'm not saying like the concept of Dr. Manhattan's going to die. I mean like that that character, that person who has history with Lori and or Angela is going to be done. Is going to be gone.
All right, and my third prediction. So I believe he says he sent the kids to Will at the theater. So my kind of low-hanging fruit prediction here is I think the kids are going to be watching some Bat Reeves in the next episode. If he's going to be at the theater with the kids, there's no doubt in my mind they're going to be watching some Bat Reeves. But there you go. So those are my three. Chad, how about you?
Well, I might as well start out with the one we've kind of already discussed, because I have it worded almost exactly as, well, maybe not quite exactly, but is actually I've got it phrased a little differently. I think Topher has Dr. Manhattan's powers. Look back at that scene where he had the things sort of floating, and he smashes it down. You know what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if he already has some of Dr. Manhattan's powers. So I guess we'll. I mean,
that would kind of mean that Angela has known that all this time
you
too.
Would think
and that
so.
Seems a little weird, but
it seems a little weird. Yeah, I agree. What hasn't seemed weird, but anyhow, so I guess I did phrase it a little differently. Now these other two I think are pretty out there. They're definitely not low hanging fruit. I have no knowledge of anything for either of these to come true. But I think we will not find out what happened to Looking Glass. I think he disappeared and he's gone.
All right.
So
gotta hope that's not the case. But
I kind of hope I'm wrong too. But I just, for some reason, he's either going to come in at just the right time to save the day, or I kind of was looking at it this way, I guess, when I was thinking about it. In a way, he was kind of humiliated, and that's sort of like one of his triggers. Do you know what I'm saying? So, he had to basically roll over on a friend, and I don't know. I just think that it's possible that he's gone. Okay, and the third one is when Veidt breaks free, he will simultaneously destroy the Europa colony. Something about him leaving, I think, destroys the colony somehow.
Yeah, see, that's what I was trying to zig away from. Like, I feel like once Veidt is done, like, there's no reason for Europa to exist anymore, so it's just going to go away. But I'm trying to zag instead of zig and say, there's going to be, and maybe that does happen, but Crookshanks and Phillips come with him. I think like there's going to be something that survives in that arrangement is what I'm thinking.
In a way, I have several things all going on at once. Because let's say when Veidt breaks free, he'll simultaneously destroy Europa. And at that exact same time, when he escapes, Lady True, he will escape when Lady True activates the Millennium Falcon clock.
Hey, they've been tick-tocking this whole time. Maybe
tick-tock.
Literally everything happens all at the same second.
So yeah, those are my Christian ponders.
Love it.
All right, yeah, and we don't need to talk about the long terms. Everybody knows what those are. So let's move on to Chad's Twitter challenge. Chad, how did last week go?
It went fine. I looked her up and I found her and I followed her and I just did a little researching. And one thing I didn't know, and I don't know how I didn't know this.
Who's her, Chad?
Frances Fisher.
Oh yeah.
You forgot who you gave me.
No, I did not know
about Frances Fisher is that she's married to Clint Eastwood. I had no idea. I guess I just don't follow that closely. But yeah. I really didn't do much. I don't feel like tweeting her is gonna like do anything great, so I just kind of looked up a few things and I followed her like I do everybody else, and yeah, I kept it pretty simple this week. I guess I'm just not that interested in Frances Fisher or the Titanic. I don't know.
Well, that's a tragedy.
She's doing a great job in Watchmen, but yeah.
I think given this Ponder segment we just did, that there's only one way to go here. So for the final episode of the Watchmen Season 1 show, we got to have you track down what may be a very important character, Topher Abar, Dylan Shambing. He's a kid, so I don't know if he's got Twitter. I don't know if his parents gave him permission. He's probably not old enough to sign up for his own Twitter. But see if he's out there. See if he's dropping any hints out there. Who knows? Maybe he's the new Dr. Manhattan.
I guess
I
we'll
mean,
see.
Clearly we spend a lot of time, too much time with this kid this year for him not to figure heavily into this. But who knows?
One of my original Twitter challenges was to see if the kid in who played Sonny Jim was on Twitter, and he was. And he was tweeting a lot. I was pretty surprised at that. So you never know. Dylan Shambing, however you say it, who plays Topher Abar, he may just be out there, and I will search him out.
Real quick, I know we're probably going long, but speaking of Topher, there's the twin girls.
Yeah.
From what it looks like on IMDb, they're not twins, and they look a hell of a lot alike. But those are just two girls who look similar.
Crazy. All right, thanks, guys. Another episode in. One left to go. I can't believe it. It seems like there's too much to go, but this is going to be some finale, guys. It's going to be a big-time show next week, I am sure, as we talk about the finale of Season 1 of Watchmen. Contact us anytime via email, watchwatchmanpod@gmail.com, or call or text the voicemail line, 608-535-9302. Don't forget, a week or two after the final episode of ours is released, we're going to have a wrap-up show where we discuss basically our thoughts overall on Season 1 and how everything went. I believe Christian's sister Kayla has agreed to join us. We have referred to her a couple times in the past, so I asked her to come on and join us for the final wrap-up show, so that is the plan right now. Thanks to Kayla, and we look forward to talking to her in the future. Once again, my name, Eric. You can find me on Twitter, Hazer, Hazer75, or over at the Flicksation podcast, talking films. And Flixmas is coming up this week. Can't wait. Christian, thanks for joining us on the road. I'm sure you would have been out gallivanting otherwise, so glad you could fit us in, man.
You know, I'm kind of introverted in work environments often, so I usually try and find an excuse to go sit in my hotel room instead of go drinking with all of my coworkers. So this gave me the perfect excuse. So thanks, guys.
And if any of your coworkers are listening, gigs up.
So yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to be doing tonight. Just pacing around a hotel room talking about Watchmen in Texas. Wouldn't have planned it any other way. So you can keep up with me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at anotherXTIAN. I have two other podcasts that I do. A horror movie show called It's Only a Podcast, and then another movie podcast called The Third Act Podcast. Both of those should have new episodes out by the time you hear this, but both of them had unrelated scheduling snafus. So I don't know if those two are going to have episodes before the next Watchmen. I guess we'll find out. If they do, for the horror movie show, we'll probably be talking about Black Christmas, the remake of that. As well as a South Korean revenge masterpiece, I Saw the Devil. And for the third act, we're going to go Shia LaBeouf heavy and talk about his movie Honey Boy, which I have seen. So don't know exactly when, but before the next episode, hopefully those episodes have come out. If not, I'll give you an update next week.
And Chad, thanks as always.
Yeah, good to be here. And I just have to say, Christian, it is cool that you're in Texas, but the next time you have to travel for work, if you could just make sure that they send you somewhere like Tulsa, so you could have been like on the road from Tulsa. I mean, I don't know. You probably have no work to do there, but whatever. Just try your best. That's all I ask. But go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm as close to Tulsa as I've ever been. Yeah. So
that's something.
Yeah.
In a Dr. Manhattan sort of way, you're there. I don't know what that means, but you are.
Thanks, man.
But good episode. I mean, it's. I don't know. I can't wait to rewatch this series when it's done, and just to sort of see all the little things that you missed, whether it's an egg reference we missed, or an Abar reference we missed, or whatever it is. It's going to be interesting. But hey, if anybody wants to find me and follow me out on Twitter, I'm at TP Bookhouse. That's TPBOOKHOUSE. I've got all the people coming to follow me lately. So just go on out there and follow me.
Thanks, guys, for listening. We look forward to talking to you next week and discussing the finale of Season 1 of Watchmen. Until then, folks, have a great week.